Our next reading is from the Gospel. It's going to be a lengthy one. May we hear afresh the story that's laid out before us in Mark's Gospel. It was 2 days before the Passover and the festival of the unleavened bread. The chief priests and scribes were looking for a way to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. For they said, "Not during the festival, or there may be a riot among the people." While he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, he sat at the table, and a woman came with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment of nard. And she broke open the jar and poured the ointment on his head. But some were there who said to one another in anger, "Why is this ointment wasted in this way? This ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii, and the money be given to the poor." And they scolded her, but Jesus said, "Let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She's performed a good service for me. For you always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you wish. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her." Then Judas Iscariot, the one who was of the 12, went to the chief priest in order to betray him to them. When they heard it, they were greatly pleased and promised to give him money. So he began to look for an opportunity to betray him. And on the first day of the unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb was sacrificed, his disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go and to make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, "Go in the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him, and wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He'll show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." So the disciples set out and went to the city and found everything just as he had told them. And they prepared the Passover meal. When it was evening, he came to the 12, and when they had taken their places and were eating, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." And they began to be distressed and say to him one after another, "Surely not I." He said to them, "It is one of the 12 who is dipping bread into the bowl with me. For the Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better had that one not been born." And while they were eating, he took a loaf of bread, and after blessing it, he gave it to them and said, "Take, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them all, and drank from it. He said to them, "This is the blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly I tell you, I will never again drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives, and Jesus said to them, "You will all become deserters, for it is written, 'I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered.' But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." And Peter said to him, even though all become deserters, I will not. And Jesus said to him, truly I tell you, this day, this very night, before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he said vehemently, even though I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all of them said the same. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. And he took with him Peter and James and John and began to be distressed and agitated. And he said to them, I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake. And going a little farther, he threw himself to the ground and he prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. He said, Abba, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want. He came and he found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep awake for 1 hour? Keep awake. Pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And again he went away and prayed, saying the very same words. Once more he came and he found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy, and they did not know what to say to him. He came a third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough, the hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let's go. See, my betrayer is at hand. Immediately while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, and with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and scribes and elders. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, the one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. So when he came, he went up to him, and at once he said, Rabbi, and kissed him. Then they laid hands on him and arrested him, but one of those who stood near drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to them, you have come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me, but let the scriptures be fulfilled. All of them deserted him and fled. A certain young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth, and they caught hold of him, but he left the cloth and ran off naked. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes were assembled, and Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priest and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. And some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I'll build another, not made with hands. But even on this point, their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you? But he was silent and did not answer. And again the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? And Jesus said, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision? And all of them condemned him as deserving death. And some began to spit on him and blindfold him and strike him, saying to him, "Prophesy." And the guards also took him over and beat him. And while Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. And when she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth." But he denied it and said, "I do not know or understand what you're talking about." And he went out into the courtyard, and the cock crowed. And then the servant girl, on seeing him, began again to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again he denied it. And after a little while, the bystander again said to Peter, "Certainly you're one of them, for you're a Galilean." But he began to curse and swore an oath, "I do not know this man you are talking about." At that moment, the cock crowed for the second time. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said to him. "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus and led him away and handed him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered, "You say so." Then the chief priest accused him of many things. And Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they're bringing against you." But Jesus made no further reply. So that Pilate was amazed. Now at the festival, he used to release a prisoner to them, anyone for whom they asked. And now he called Barabbas, was in prison, a rebel who had committed murder during his insurrection. So the crowd came, and he began to ask Pilate do for them according to his custom. And then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priest had handed him over. But the chief priest stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas instead. And Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call the king of the Jews?" And they shouted back, "Crucify him." And Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted the more, "Crucify him!" So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. After flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and they twisted some thorns into a crown. And they put it on him, and they began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They struck his head with a reed, and they spat upon him and knelt down in homage to him. And after mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak. They put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. And then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9:00 in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "King of the Jews." And with him they crucified 2 bandits, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha! you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days. Save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now, so that we may see and believe." And those who were crucified with him also taunted him. And when it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, and at 3 o'clock Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he is calling Elijah." And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine and put it on a stick and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let's see whether Elijah will come and take him down." And then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from the top to the bottom. Now when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was God's Son." There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them was Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the younger, and Josie and Salome. These used to follow him and provide for him when he was in Galilee, and there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. And when evening had come, and since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself waiting expectantly for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate wondered if he were already dead, and summoned the centurion. He asked him whether he had been dead for some time, and when he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. And then Joseph brought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the linen cloth and laid it in a tomb that had been hewn out of rock, and then rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Josie, saw where the body was laid. Thus ends the reading of the gospel. I need not say any more. So be it. Amen.